David, they call me MacGyver. Today I'm going to show you how to disassemble a MacBook Air that had water spilled on it. My granddaughters were over at our house during COVID and doing their schoolwork, and one of them knocked over a glass of water right on the keyboard of an older MacBook Air. And we immediately put it into a Tupperware container with rice, but we didn't have instant rice, so we put it in with that rice, and then we went and bought instant rice, and after a day we put it into the instant rice, which is supposed to absorb more water. So we tried to get the water out that way, but after 3 or 4 days of it sitting in the rice, we pulled it out and it still would not power up. So I decided it was worth the risk to take it apart, and I ended up using tools that I had for cell phones. I used to take apart cell phones and do water damage repair. So I used a Torx head that I had and ended up having to grind it down to fit the Torx screws in the bottom of the MacBook Air. But because it's tapered, so I just ground it until it was big enough to fit the back of that panel. It was a T4 is what you need, and I think I had a T2. But I was able to get the thing apart, and I'll show you how I did that. And I'll also put a link in the description where you can actually get a good set of Torx head screwdrivers and the little pry bars and stuff that I use to open up the casing and stuff without scratching it. I'll put that in the description. So hang tight and we'll get started. So here's the back or bottom of the MacBook Air, and you just take your Torx bit screwdriver and remove the screws all around the perimeter. And if you'll notice, I've got a t-shirt there. It's just one out of my rag bag. I laid it down that way. When I lay the screws on it, they don't roll all over, and then there's not a lot of texture to it, so it's easy to find your screws and they don't roll off the table. And I try to, now you see this screw, it's longer. The two in the very back hinge are the longer screws, so you don't get them confused up. You want to make sure you put those back into the same locations you pulled them out of. And the screwdriver I'm using was magnetic, so it's easy to keep track of those screws and just drop them down. Then this little plastic tool here, pry tool, that also comes in that Torx bit kit. You can just pry that up, and that way you don't scratch or damage your computer when you're working on it. And right up by the hinge is the easiest place to get your fingers in. Once you get that going, you can just kind of move your hand around, and that'll come right off there. And there is water. Water all in there. So I'll wipe that out. Even though we put this in rice, there's still moisture in there. I'm so glad I took it apart, because even if it had powered up, that moisture could have caused irreparable damage. Corrosion can just continue to grow. So you want to wipe all that moisture out of there, get it out of there, and get that put down. And then there's more moisture that's sitting in there, so I wipe all that out of there. And I see a bunch of rice. It must have come in through the hinge area. There's rice actually in there. I'm going to dump that out, get it out of there. There's another piece, get it out of there. And the first thing you want to do is you want to disconnect cables, and this is the one for the hinge that goes up to the monitor. And there's just a little bail. You open that up and then very gently pull the ribbon wire back, and it'll slide right out of its slot. And I want to get that out of there, and I will also clean that with some electrical contact cleaner just to be sure that there's no corrosion on there. It looked pretty clean, but I just want to make sure. And this is the battery housing, and I'm taking out the screws that hold that battery housing in. So I believe there's 5 screws, 4 around the corners, and then 1 right in the very middle. And if you set your screws down close to where you get them out, it's easy to remember where they go back then. You can use your own system. That's just kind of my system. And then there's a little plug here that you want to undo. That's the power plug for the battery that goes to the circuit board. And there is a little moisture in there. Get that out of there. And also some underneath where the battery was. Just want to get that moisture out of it. You don't want it to continue to be able to grow in there. Now I'm going to check out the circuit board, and I've got some CRC electrical contact cleaner, and it doesn't leave a residue, and it will actually absorb the moisture and then evaporate. But when I put that in there, I actually scrub it out. There's a little rubber bushing that came out of the corner. I'm going to stick it back in there so I don't lose that. But use a used toothbrush that's already been broke down so it's nice and soft, and that way you don't put too much pressure on those circuits. But you just spray that electrical contact cleaner in there, and I'm going to clean that connector that goes up to the monitor just to be sure. I didn't see any corrosion on it, but sometimes there might be something in there, and that's a critical part because that sends a signal up to the monitor. So I scrub it off, and then that contact cleaner will evaporate, and if there is any moisture, it'll actually evaporate with it. I used to repair cell phones, and I've saved so many people's cell phones that were dropped in water. So anyway, there's a little corrosion there. We continue to clean that. A little bit over here. This was only in the rice for 3 or 4 days, but that corrosion has already started growing, and it'll actually jump across contacts, and it can actually short out circuit boards. So you want to get that out of there. If you ever do drop something in water or spill water on it, you want to power it down as quickly as possible. If the batteries are removable, you want to get them off. If they're not, then power it off, and you can throw it in some instant rice. Actually is the best, but that doesn't always get all the moisture out. As you can well see that I dumped rice out of the computer. It must have got in through the hinge slot. And then I'm going to start pulling screws out. I want to take this whole circuit board out of there so that I can look underneath it to be sure that there's no corrosion underneath there. And that is a little bigger. I'm going to grab I have another Torx bit that I ground down. That's probably a T5, and the ones in the bottom of the MacBook Air were T4s, and that was another little cable there. I'm going to get that out of there. I think there was a piece of rice I pulled out, but there's a little cable there. You want to get that disconnected. Any cables that are attached, of course, you want to clean too, because there could be corrosion in there, moisture. I just want to scrub everything, be sure that I've got a good clean surface on there before I put this all back together. And then there's screws all the way around the base. So we're gonna, on that circuit board, we're gonna take those all out. And one of my screwdrivers is magnetic and the other's not. That's why I use that other little screwdriver to pull that screw out of there so it doesn't fall down in where I can't get it. And just use that to lift the screw out. Yeah, that kit that I'll put a link for in the description has T2, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's got the plastic pry tools that you'll see me using. And that way you can get a complete kit with good Torx heads. You won't have to do any modifications. Another screw there. Some of these are in there pretty snug, but get those out of there. Another screw down in there. And that one screw is really tight, so I've got a little tiny pair of pliers. They're Leatherman tools, and I'm going to get it twisted so that I break it loose, and then I can use the screwdriver to take it out. And there's two little Wi-Fi cables over here, and I'm going to mark one of them so that I know where it goes back. Just putting a little mark on it and next to it so that I know that that's the one where the mark goes back. And then I'll, the pry tool didn't work. I'm going to use a little dental tool and pop that antenna up off of the board. Get it out of the way. And then we'll pry that board up. Oh, looks like I've got another little cable over here on my left side. Your right, my left. Right in there. Get that out of there so I can open this up. Use my dental tool. Okay, now I can flip it over and check out the back of that circuit board, see if there's any corrosion on it. It's actually looking pretty good. I don't see any moisture. Don't see any corrosion. Ah, there's a little piece of rice though. But yeah, it looks pretty clean. I'm going to close it back up and then start putting all the cables back on and the screws, and just using a pair of tweezers to hold that little Wi-Fi cable, and then using my dental tool, the back side of it, the round part, just to push that down onto its terminal. And there, like I said, there's two of them, so I get both of them put back on there. And you'll feel it go on. Don't force it. If it's not going on, make sure that you have it lined up. And then this is that wire in the corner that connects up to the monitor. Slide it back into its spot and then flip that bail back over, and that holds it in. So the rest of it, you'll just put it back together in the same order you took it apart. And it was a successful repair. My granddaughter's using her MacBook Air. She's back in school, and I'll leave a description or a link in the description for the CRC cleaner and also the Torx bit set. In case you ever run across something like this, you'll have the proper equipment to repair it. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, if you'll do that, click the bell icon, and then every time I come out with a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks a lot for watching. You have a great day.